The transition occurs without a fanfare, without a thunderclap, and without the courtesy of a warning. One moment the anchor holds, the next, the chain is severed. Imagine the sudden, jarring sterility of a morning that refuses to acknowledge your history. You wake not in the soft, familiar embrace of your own sanctuary, but in a space that feels indifferent, if not entirely hostile, to your presence. The air tastes of static, the ozone scent of a world that has wiped its memory clean. Your first movement is instinctual, a relic of a life built on digital tethering. You reach for the device, the glowing oracle that dictates the boundaries of your agency. With a thumb swipe, you seek the familiar comfort of the ledger. You look for the digital tally, the numerical proof that you exist, that you are solvent, that you are tethered to the reality you spent years constructing. But the screen is an abyss. The bank balance has been bleached to a chilling absolute zero. There is no safety net woven from past savings. There are no dividends from the sweat of yesterday's labor. In this crystalline moment of vacuum, the ego screams. It recognizes the loss of the currency, but it misses the deeper, more terrifying truth. It has lost its external justification for worth. Without the number on the screen, who is the occupant of the room? To the uninitiated, this is the apocalypse, the definitive end of the narrative. But for the soul, this is something else entirely. It is a terrifying, beautiful threshold. You are no longer living, you are beginning. The room is no longer a cage of status. It is a laboratory of the spirit, and the zero you stare at is not a sign of death, but the perfect, empty container for the genesis of a new order. Why does the collapse of the financial ledger feel synonymous with the collapse of the self? To answer this, one must deconstruct the architecture of the modern identity. For most, reality is a mirror held up by the material world. If the reflection is robust, if the bank account is healthy and the status is solidified, the ego perceives itself as real and secure. When the material reflection fades into a zero, the ego experiences a psychic death. It believes it has ceased to exist because it has forgotten how to be without the crutch of external validation. The philosophical error here is the inversion of cause and effect. The materialist believes that the bank balance is the cause of their security. Therefore, they labor to move the numbers, treating the account as the engine room of their life. This is why they suffer. They are attempting to manipulate the reflection in the mirror to change the object standing before it. It is an impossible task, a recursive loop of futility. The deeper truth is this: the zero is not a lack of supply. It is the presence of an absolute. It is the removal of the shadows of the material world, those distractions that masquerade as security. When the shadow is erased, the light, the source, becomes visible for the first time. To reach this level of awareness, one must ask, how does one survive the transition from being a product of circumstance to being the architect of reality? The answer lies in the realization that currency is merely an echo, not the voice. The voice is the internal conviction. When you are at zero, you are finally in the Holy of Holies. You are stripped of the armor of things, which forces you to confront the law of substance. If the universe is a construct of consciousness, then money is not an external force to be hunted. It is a manifestation of an internal frequency. The why of your poverty is found in the why of your belief. You are broke not because the economy is cruel, but because your subconscious mind has issued a verdict of scarcity, and the universe, a servant of impeccable obedience, has provided exactly what you decreed. The zero is not a prison. It is the only place where you are finally free to change the broadcast. In the annals of a forgotten city, there lived an architect named Elias. His life was a monument to structural integrity. He built cathedrals that defied gravity and palaces that tasted of opulence. His reputation was his currency, and his wealth was a fortress. But there came a great fire, a cleansing, unsparing inferno that razed the city to its limestone foundations. Elias emerged from the smoke with nothing but the scorched clothes on his back. His ledgers were ash, his blueprints reduced to carbon flakes in the wind. His peers, survivors of the same ruin, wept for their lost status. They gathered in the town square, lamenting the collapse of their fortunes, their eyes fixed on the charred ruins of what they had possessed. They were looking at the screen, weeping over the broken pixels. Elias, however, did not look at the ruins. He walked to the center of the barren gray earth. He did not ask his neighbors for help, nor did he search for his lost coins. He stood in the silence of the void. He closed his eyes and began to hum a low, resonant frequency that seemed to pull at the very air. He was not looking for what he had lost. He was anchoring the blueprint of a future that had not yet materialized. For 7 days, he sat in the dust. He refused to speak of the fire. He refused to speak of the loss. When people asked how he would rebuild without stone or gold, he would only smile and say, "The cathedral is already standing. I am merely waiting for the ground to catch up." He treated the dust beneath his feet as if it were marble, and the silence as if it were the cheering of a crowd. Within a month, a stranger from a distant land arrived, drawn by a rumor of a man who possessed a vision so clear it felt like a summons. The stranger possessed the materials Elias lacked, but lacked the vision Elias held. The partnership was instantaneous. Within a year, the city did not just return to its former state. It was rebuilt with a brilliance that dwarfed the original. Elias had learned the secret. The fire had not ruined him. It had simply cleared the brush so that he could see the true foundation of his power, the unshakable internal blueprint. The transition from victim to sovereign begins with the intentional act of decoupling. You must recognize that your bank account is not your life. It is a lagging indicator of your consciousness. Like the dial on a radio, your current financial state is merely the result of the frequency you have been tuned to for years. To integrate this truth, you must perform the vow of the blank slate. Today, take a physical sheet of paper. Write the number 0 inches the center. Look at it, but do not look with the eyes of the man who fears eviction. Look with the eyes of the master who sees an empty canvas. Acknowledge that the old laws, the laws of not enough, of hard work equals reward, of luck, have been burned away in the fire of this realization. You are now authorized to write the new laws of your life. Before we proceed, consider this. If you could truly, in this very moment, discard the fear of your zero balance, what is the first thing you would dare to claim? If you are ready to stop being a survivor and start being the architect of your own reality, hit the subscribe button to seal your commitment to this journey. Share in the comments below. What is the one old story about money that you are burning today? I read every entry, as it is a sacred act of setting an intention for your new life. You have begun the process of reclamation. But the slate is now clean, and a clean slate is dangerous if left empty. The shadows of the past will attempt to rush back in, whispering of your history and your failures. You must learn to guard the gateway of your mind. In the next chapter, we move from the void to the projector. We will explore how to stop fighting the shadows on the screen and how to seize the controls of the light itself. The screen is about to change. Stay in the light. Imagine, if you will, the grandest theater ever constructed. A structure whose walls span the curvature of the horizon. You sit alone in the velvet dark, your eyes fixed upon a colossal screen that flickers with the relentless imagery of your own existence. You see scenes of struggle, a bank statement in red, a locked door, the weary lines of stress etched upon your own face in a mirror. You are gripped by the drama. You weep at the tragedy, you tense at the conflict, and you scream at the villain, the circumstance of lack that seems to dominate every frame of the film. You are so convinced by the veracity of the projected light that you leap from your seat, fingers clawing at the screen, desperately attempting to tear down the images that offend your soul. You try to smooth the wrinkles in the fabric, to paint over the darkness with your own trembling hands, hoping to rearrange the plot by force. But the screen remains indifferent to your frantic touch. The light continues to pour from behind you, casting the same relentless shadows, the same looping narrative of scarcity. You are exhausted, your fingernails are torn, and the drama unfolds exactly as it did before. You have mistaken the effect for the cause. You have mistaken the shadow for the substance. In this grand theater of the material world, most souls spend their entire lives fighting the shadows on the screen, never once turning around to look at the projector. The paradox is as cruel as it is simple. You cannot change the film by attacking the screen. The screen is merely a passive receiver, a silent witness to the light that defines it. To rewrite the story, one must leave the screen behind, face the blinding intensity of the source, and dare to handle the film itself. Why is it that the human consciousness remains so stubbornly fixated on the shadow? The answer lies in the seductive nature of the external world, the objectified reality. Because we are conditioned by our senses, we believe that the world we touch, taste, and see is the primary reality. We are taught that the world does things to us. We believe we are the victims of the economy, the victims of history, and the victims of the luck we happen to be dealt. This is the great inversion. In truth, the material world is the echo. It is the trailing sound of a voice that has already spoken. To deconstruct this, one must employ recursive thinking. Why do we perceive the world as an external force? Because we have outsourced our creative agency to the environment. We look at a bank balance of zero and say, "I am broke." We believe the zero is the fact, and our belief is the reaction. But the spiritual law dictates the inverse. Our belief is the fact, and the zero is the reaction. The bank account is not a creator. It is a mirror. It has no power to originate. It can only reflect. How then does one cease this recursive loop of suffering? You must recognize the mechanism of the boomerang. Every thought you hold, every conviction you harbor, every emotional charge you cultivate is a projectile launched into the infinite. The universe, acting as the perfect acoustic chamber, eventually returns the exact resonance of that launch to your doorstep. If you launch a thought of lack, you have commissioned the universe to manifest the conditions that support that thought. It is not that you are unlucky. It is that you are terrifyingly accurate in your own self-fulfilling prophecy. The struggle to change the shadow is, therefore, an act of spiritual insanity. When you fight the enemy of debt, you are not killing it. You are feeding it with the raw energy of your focus. You are reinforcing its reality. To break this cycle, you must undergo a shift in orientation. You must stop asking, "How can I fix this problem?" and begin asking, "What internal frequency am I radiating that makes this problem possible?" The projector is the subconscious mind, and the film is your deep-seated conviction. You must be willing to sit in the stillness and re-edit the film, frames by frames, before the light strikes the screen of your outer life. In a village nestled between two mountain ranges, there lived a master weaver named Kalin. His tapestries were legendary, not merely for their vibrant colors, but for the way they seemed to capture the very essence of the viewer's desires. When a man full of joy looked at Kalin's work, he saw portraits of abundance. When a woman full of fear stood before them, she saw portraits of decay. The secret to Kalin's art was a hidden loom kept in a chamber of absolute silence. It was said that Kalin did not weave with wool but with light and intention. One year, a great famine struck the valley. The fields withered, the rivers turned to dust, and the village fell into a state of collective despair. The people came to Kalin, demanding he weave tapestries of prosperity to bring the rain and the grain back to the land. Kalin took their request, but he did not go to the market to find gold or seeds. He retreated to his silent chamber. He sat before the loom for 40 days, not touching the threads. He spent the time in deep meditative practice, weaving the idea of the harvest into the very air of his room. He walked through the motions of reaping in his mind, feeling the weight of the golden stalks in his hands, tasting the bread of a feast that had not yet occurred. He was editing the film of the village's reality within the projector of his own consciousness. On the 41st day, Kalin emerged and presented a single plain tapestry that appeared to be woven of nothing but shimmering white light. "The harvest is ready," he declared to the skeptical, hungry crowd. They looked at the white light, saw no physical grain, and mocked him. But that very evening the winds shifted. A storm broke over the mountains, bringing water that had been absent for months. Seeds that had lain dormant in the dust, seemingly dead, burst into life overnight. Kalin had understood the law of boomerangs. He did not fight the drought. He did not scream at the dry sky. He went to the loom of his own mind, projected the image of a lush, fertile valley, and held that frequency until the universe had no choice but to conform. He knew that the external world was a malleable shadow, and that the only true work took place in the silent, invisible theater of the spirit. To integrate this truth into your own life requires a courageous pivot. You must begin to treat your current circumstances not as fixed, immutable laws, but as old, discarded film strips that have already run their course. The next time you find yourself staring at a problem, a bill, a rejection, an empty space where you want something to be, you must consciously pull your eyes away from the screen. Practice the pause of the projector. Close your eyes. Acknowledge the image that is appearing in your outer world, but remind yourself, this is an echo. This is the past playing itself out. This is not the current truth. In this space, Do not attempt to solve the problem with manual labor or frantic planning. Instead, hold the image of what you intend to manifest. See it with the clarity of a mountain stream. Feel the relief, the joy, and the certainty of that reality, as if it were already playing on the screen. Do this daily, not to force an outcome, but to align your frequency with the light you desire to project. If you are beginning to feel the shift, if the weight of the screen is finally starting to lift, like this video to signal your alignment with this new frequency. Comment the word projector below to affirm your role as the commander of your own light. I am watching these declarations, and together we are resetting the reel. You are beginning to understand that you are the master of the broadcast. You are no longer a victim of the shadows. You are the one who chooses the film. But, as you begin to adjust the light, you will notice a strange phenomenon. The old shadows, having been ignored, may appear to flicker with a final, desperate intensity. They are trying to lure you back into the old drama. How do you silence the voices that scream of lack when the shadows are at their darkest? In our next chapter, we shall explore the most powerful tool in the Sovereign's kit, the alchemy of the word. The shadows are just memories. The word is the command. Stay focused on the light. The room is quiet, save for the rhythmic, metronomic ticking of a clock that seems to count down the seconds of a life misspent. You sit in the dimming twilight, and in the stillness, the air begins to vibrate with a familiar, insidious sound, the internal monologue. It is a whisper, sharp as a razor, sliding through the shadows of your mind. I cannot, it purrs. I do not have enough, it sighs. This is just how my life is destined to be, it rationalizes. You think you are merely observing your reality, reporting on the state of your affairs as a neutral witness. You think you are being realistic, but observe closely, for you are witnessing a clandestine act of sorcery. You are an unintentional alchemist, holding a wand that you do not know how to wield, and with every sentence you utter, you are inscribing the walls of your own prison. The paradox is this: you seek freedom, yet you chain yourself with the very words you use to describe your lack of it. You are walking through the world like a man who complains of the cold while simultaneously freezing the air with his own breath. Your speech is not a passive description of the world. It is the active construction of it. Every time you voice a complaint, you are casting a spell of limitation upon your own subconscious, creating a legal document of poverty that the universe is bound by law to honor. The air in the room is not just air, it is a canvas, and your words are the ink. You have been writing a tragedy, believing all the while that you were merely a character in it. It is time to realize that you are the author, the narrator, and the lead actor, and the script you have been reading is the only thing standing between you and your throne. Why is the human tongue so prone to the utterance of limitation? To understand this, one must peer into the machinery of the subconscious mind. The subconscious is a literal-minded servant, a vast biological manufacturing plant that operates without a sense of irony, humor, or skepticism. It possesses no capacity for the nuance of just venting. When you say, "I am drowning in debt," the subconscious does not hear a metaphor. It hears an instruction to provide more water, more pressure, and more depth to the debt. Recursive thinking compels us to ask, why does the subconscious respond to words as if they were commands? Because words are the primary vessels of belief. In the architecture of the human experience, a thought is a ghost, but a word is a body. When you clothe a thought in language and release it into the atmosphere, you grant it the authority of a decree. How does this process function within the framework of the law of boomerangs? Consider that every word spoken is a vibration launched into the infinite lattice of existence. If you vibrate at the frequency of lack, the universe, the perfect acoustic chamber, must return the resonance of that lack. When you inherit the vocabulary of your ancestors, phrases like "money doesn't grow on trees" or "we aren't the lucky ones," you are not just speaking, you are reciting a generational curse. You have accepted a legal verdict of poverty as your identity. The how of breaking this cycle is a radical act of linguistic hygiene. One must stop treating their words as mere communication and begin treating them as sacred conduits of creation. You must ask yourself, if my life were to manifest exactly as I spoke it today, would I be proud of the world I have built? If you find yourself speaking of lack, You are signing a contract with the shadow. To change the contract, you must revoke your signature. You must stop identifying with the situation and start identifying with the word. The subconscious does not argue with conviction. It bows to it. When you command your reality with the authority of a sovereign, the universe, which has been waiting for your direction, will realign its gears to match your new frequency. In a walled kingdom, where the people had forgotten how to dream, there lived an old scribe who spent his days in the marketplace. While the citizens hurried to and fro, whispering of their debts, their illnesses, and the inevitable decline of their fortunes, the scribe sat with a parchment that remained perpetually blank. He was known as the man who spoke only in affirmations, even when his belly was empty and his robes were frayed. A young man, burdened by the heavy yoke of a family debt that had spanned 3 generations, came to the scribe. "Teach me your trick," the youth pleaded. "My words are heavy with the truth of my poverty. I speak of my hardship so that others may help me. Yet the more I speak, the deeper the hole becomes." The scribe smiled, and with a quill, he drew a single glowing line across the youth's palm. "Your words are not descriptions of your life," the scribe whispered. "They are the architects of your tomb. You have spent your life describing the stone, and now you find yourself trapped within it." The scribe then gave the youth a task. He was to go for 7 days and 7 nights without uttering a single sentence of lack. If he felt the urge to complain, he was to touch the line on his palm and remain silent. The youth struggled. He found that when he could not speak of his troubles, he felt as though he were suffocating. He realized that his identity was stitched together by his complaints. But as the days passed, the silence began to shift. Without the constant reinforcement of his own despair, his mind grew quiet. In that quiet, he began to hear the subtle rhythms of the world, the sound of opportunity, the unseen currents of grace. By the 4th day, he noticed a merchant who had been searching for an apprentice with exactly his temperament. By the 7th day, the weight of the old verdict had dissolved. He had stopped fueling the fire of his debt with the fuel of his focus. He realized that the debt had not changed. He had changed, and in that change, the debt had lost its power to define him. He had learned that his word was his wand, and he had finally begun to wave it. The integration of this truth is a practice of constant vigilance. You must become the gatekeeper of your own speech. For the next 7 days, you are to undergo a word fast. This is not a fast from food, but a fast from the language of limitation. When the urge arises to complain about the price of a loaf of bread, the state of your bank account, or the difficulty of your circumstances, you must consciously halt. Replace the statement of lack with a statement of intent. If you cannot speak in abundance, you must speak in silence. To begin this practice, sit down with a scrap of paper and list the inherited verdicts, the phrases and beliefs about money you were taught as a child. Acknowledge them, and then, with the authority of one who is reclaiming their throne, cross them out. Write beneath them a new decree. I am the sovereign of my experience. My word is my command, and I command that my supply be as limitless as the source from which it flows. If you are ready to stop being an accidental sorcerer and start mastering your creation, subscribe to join the ranks of the conscious builders. Share in the comments below. What is the first inherited verdict you are canceling today? I am here to witness your reclamation. You have begun the process of purification. You have cleared the slate, adjusted the projector, and sharpened the wand of your word. But a wand, however powerful, is useless if the hand that holds it remains clenched in a fist of fear. You have cleared the way for the flow, but you must now learn how to receive. In the next chapter, we shall explore the most counterintuitive, most profound secret of the Master, the art of blessing the very things that seem to be causing you pain. The burden is not the obstacle. It is the bridge. Prepare your heart for the alchemy of the blessing. The transition into the Holy of Holies begins not with the fanfare of trumpets, but with the profound, heavy stillness of a library at midnight. Imagine stepping into the center of a storm, not a storm of wind and rain, but a cyclone of your own conditioned thoughts, the incessant noise of past failures, and the frantic ticking of the clock. You have spent your life standing in the foyer of your existence, looking through the windows at the lives of others, or worse, staring at the locked doors of your own potential. But tonight, you take a step inward. You move past the foyer, past the heavy velvet curtains of social conditioning, and into the inner sanctum. Here, the air is thick with a different kind of tension. It is the static electricity of unexpressed power. You sit in this silence, and for the first time, the old law, that rigid, calcified structure of inherited beliefs, seems to loom over you, a spectral architecture made of iron bars and cold stone. You look at these bars. They are inscribed with the slogans of your upbringing. Life is a struggle. You are not enough. The world is a hard place. The paradox is staggering. You are, in this moment, entirely free to leave, yet you are paralyzed by the conviction that you are a prisoner. You are like a lion in a cage whose door has been unlatched for years, yet you remain huddled in the corner because you have forgotten what it means to be a predator. The silence of the Holy of Holies is not a comfort, it is a mirror. It forces you to confront the architect of your own incarceration. You are the prisoner, the jailer, and the builder of the walls. And in this sacred, terrifying silence, you realize that the only thing holding the roof of your reality together is your own silent agreement to the terms of your servitude. Why do we cling to the old law even when it brings us nothing but suffering? To answer this, we must look at the psychological survival mechanism of the ego. The ego finds comfort in consistency. It would rather exist in a familiar misery than embrace an unfamiliar miracle. The old law, the collective consciousness of lack, scarcity, and competition, acts as a psychic blanket. It provides a narrative, a reason for our struggles, and a map of our limitations. To discard it is to venture into the void, and the ego fears the void more than it fears death. Recursive thinking reveals the architecture of this trap. Why do we accept the verdict of the old law? Because we have been conditioned to believe that life is a battle, a zero-sum game where one man's gain is another's loss. If we accept this, we are constantly on guard, constantly competing, and constantly fearing that our supply will run out. How does this belief sustain itself? It does so through our continued participation. Every time we judge our progress by the yardstick of the material world, we reaffirm the validity of the old law. The solution, the sovereign decree, requires a radical departure from this consciousness. You must realize that the old law is not a law at all. It is merely a set of opinions held by those who did not know their own power. True law, the divine law, operates on a different frequency. It is the law of the harvest, which does not care about your past, your bank balance, or your struggle. It only cares about the seed you plant in the soil of your consciousness today. How then do you make the leap? You must perform an act of metaphysical secession. You must declare, with the authority of a sovereign, that you are no longer a subject of the kingdom of lack. You are not arguing with the old reality. You are simply withdrawing your allegiance. You are moving your residence from the realm of the effect to the realm of the cause. In the Holy of Holies, you are the final authority. When you speak your decree, you are not asking for permission. You are asserting your birthright. You are the light, the projector, and the film. The old prison is not destroyed. It simply ceases to exist in your reality because you have removed the fuel, the belief that kept its lights on. There was once a kingdom where the soil was notoriously barren. The people lived in a state of perpetual hunger, convinced that the earth was cursed. They spent their lives in back-breaking labor, scratching at the dry gray ground, praying for a rain that never came, and cursing the sky for its cruelty. Among them was a prince who had been raised in the palace, shielded from the common misery. When he reached maturity, he went into the orchard to find food, only to find the trees withered and the fruit shriveled to dust. While the farmers lamented and argued over who deserved the scraps of the previous season, the prince sat beneath the oldest, most decayed tree. He did not ask why the tree was dead. He asked himself what a healthy tree felt like. He entered into a state of profound, sovereign silence. He didn't just imagine fruit. He imagined the sensation of abundance. He felt the weight of the harvest in his hands. He smelled the sweetness of the sap. He heard the rustle of leaves and a gentle, life-giving breeze. He stayed there for 3 days and 3 nights, refusing to acknowledge the brown earth and the withered branches. When the townspeople mocked him, he did not defend himself. He simply continued his meditation, anchoring the frequency of the orchard into the atmosphere. On the 4th day, the sky began to darken, not with the thunder of a storm, but with the gentle, rhythmic hum of a change in pressure. Rain began to fall warm, golden rain that seemed to glow in the twilight. The people watched in awe as the trees, which had been brittle and dry for decades, began to turn a vibrant, pulsating green. The sap began to flow. Buds burst into blossom, and within a single hour, the orchard was heavy with fruit so ripe it bent the branches toward the earth. The prince had not fought the drought. He had simply walked into the Holy of Holies and issued a decree of life. He had recognized that the curse was merely the collective agreement of the people, and by refusing to agree, he had broken the enchantment for all. The integration of this truth demands a ritual of separation. Today, you must physically and mentally separate yourself from the old law. Take a sheet of paper and write down the rules you have been living by, the fears, the limitations, the beliefs about your unworthiness. Look at them. Recognize them as the architecture of a prison you no longer wish to inhabit. Now, do not tear the paper. That is too violent. Instead, place it on a table and light a candle. As you hold the paper, speak aloud. By the power of the divine within me, I now move out from under the old law of lack. I break every covenant of poverty I have inherited or created. My word is my wand, and I am the sovereign of my house. This contract is now null and void. Then, let the paper burn. Watch the ash, and recognize that the power the words once held over you has evaporated into the ether. If you are ready to officially secede from the old law and take your place as a sovereign, like this video to affirm your new status. Leave a comment below with the words, "The decree is signed." Your declaration is the first step of your new reign. You have burned the old contract. You have claimed your seat at the center of the projector, but you are about to face a test of your new sovereignty. As you begin to walk in your power, the old shadows will try to follow you, masquerading as urgent problems that demand your immediate attention. They will look like bills, like conflict, like accidents. How do you handle these phantom intruders without breaking your silence? In our next chapter, we shall explore the most advanced, most sacred technique of the alchemist, the art of blessing the burden. You are moving from the prison into the palace. Make sure you carry the right key. The clock strikes 3:00 a.m., that hollow hour when the world is stripped of its daytime distractions and the mind is left to its own devices. You lie in the dark, the silence punctuated only by the aggressive hum of your own thoughts. Before you, on the scarred surface of your desk, lie the agents of your distress. A final notice for the rent, a stack of envelopes with jagged edges that feel like teeth, a ledger that mirrors the void of your own uncertainty. The visceral panic is a physical weight, a constriction in the chest that mimics the sensation of drowning in dry air. You are at war with these slips of paper. You hate them. You view them as enemies, as intruders, as the physical manifestation of your failure. You have spent your energy screaming at them, hiding them in drawers, or losing sleep over their inevitable arrival. But consider the paradox. The more you resist them, the more real they become. The more you pour your fear and your loathing into these bills, the more they grow, feeding on the very intensity of your resistance. You are locked in a violent embrace with the enemy, and you are losing. But what if the bill is not the enemy? What if the paper, that simple, innocuous instrument of exchange, is actually a disguised messenger, a neutral channel for the divine flow? The terror you feel is not caused by the bill. It is caused by your refusal to see it for what it truly is, a symptom of a closed circuit. You are trying to hold back the ocean with a sieve, and the exhaustion you feel is the inevitable consequence of a soul fighting against its own abundance. Why does resistance act as the anchor of our suffering? To understand this, one must peer into the metaphysical physics of the universe. In the realm of spirit, energy is governed by the law of resonance. When you fight a circumstance, you are focusing your consciousness upon it with a high-intensity, low-vibration emotional charge, fear, resentment, or anger. By doing so, you are anchoring that circumstance into your reality. You are, in effect, signing a decree that says, "This condition is powerful, it is real, and it is my master." Recursive thinking demands we ask, why do we feel compelled to fight the negative? Because the ego is programmed for survival, and it perceives anything that threatens its comfort as a predator to be slain. But the soul knows that the universe is a closed system of perfect harmony. The why of our struggle is our ignorance of the how of manifestation. We struggle because we believe in a world of scarcity, where resources are limited and money is a finite commodity that must be won in a battle. How does one dissolve the power of the enemy? You must engage in the alchemy of the blessing. To bless a thing is not a passive act of piety, it is a profound act of transfiguration. When you bless your debt, you are not saying, "I am glad I am in debt." You are saying, "I recognize the divine power within this transaction." You are stripping away the mask of the shadow. When you stop resisting the rock in the river, the burden, the debt, the limitation, you cease to be a swimmer struggling against the current and become a vessel carried by it. The bill is not a wall, it is a conduit. By blessing it, you are opening the channel. You are acknowledging that the supply required to pay the demand already exists in the spiritual ether. The demand creates the supply. They are two poles of the same magnet. If you see the bill as a monster, you stay in the dark. If you see it as a messenger, you invite the solution to manifest. The struggle is not against the circumstance, the struggle is against your own perception of it. In the bustling trade port of Oakhaven, there lived a merchant named Silas who was renowned for his bad luck. Every venture he touched seemed to wither. Every shipment he awaited arrived at the bottom of the sea or was confiscated by pirates. His ledgers were filled with red ink, a roadmap of his misfortune. Silas lived in a perpetual state of bitterness, fighting every invoice, arguing with every creditor, and spending his nights cursing the stars. He was a man drowning in the ocean of his own resistance. One day, an old master of the desert, a woman known for her uncanny prosperity, visited the market. She saw Silas frantically tearing up a demand for payment, his face purple with rage. She stepped forward, caught his hand, and stopped the movement. "You are throwing away your gold," she said softly. Silas laughed bitterly. "This is a debt, woman. It is the thief of my life." The master took the paper from his trembling hand. She did not look at the amount, she looked at the paper itself. "This is a record of an exchange," she said. "It is the shadow of a transaction that has already occurred in the mind of the divine. By fighting it, you are denying the flow of the very wealth you claim to seek. You are trying to plug the pipe of your own abundance." She taught Silas a strange practice. She told him that for every bill he received, he was to place it on a small altar in his shop, light a candle, and say, "I thank the divine for this, and I bless the channel through which my supplies shall return 1,000-fold." Silas thought the woman was mad, but he was so desperate he agreed. He began to bless his bills. He treated them as holy documents of future prosperity. The first few weeks were silent, but then the atmosphere of his shop began to shift. Customers he had not seen in years began to wander in, drawn by a sense of peace he had never before projected. Deals he had forgotten about began to bear fruit. The debt did not disappear overnight, but it lost its sting. It became a partner, a part of the engine of his business. Within a year, Silas was the wealthiest merchant in the port. He had learned that the burden was not a weight to be carried, it was a bridge to be crossed. The integration of this truth is a practice of spiritual transformation. You must begin to view your burdens as holy messengers. Today, find the one financial obligation that triggers the most visceral fear in your chest. Do not hide it. Do not avoid it. Take it, hold it in your hands, and physically feel the tension it creates. Then soften your heart. Take a deep, slow breath and look at the paper not as a bill but as an invitation. Say this aloud: "I recognize you as a channel of the divine flow. I bless you, and I thank the divine that the supply for this demand is already provided. I walk with the current, not against it." As you speak, feel the tightness in your chest begin to dissipate. You are not just paying a bill. You are closing a circuit of abundance. You are acknowledging that you are a participant in a universe of infinite exchange, not a victim of a finite system. If you are ready to let go of the struggle and step into the flow of grace, like this video to affirm your release of resistance. Comment the words, "The current carries me below," to solidify this commitment. I am witnessing your transition from a fighter to a master. You have mastered the art of the blessing. You have turned your enemies into allies and your burdens into bridges. But, even as the flow begins to increase, you will find that the universe requires one more thing from you. You must be able to specify the shape of your desire. You have cleared the channel, but now you must place the order. What is it that you truly demand from the infinite storehouse? In our next chapter, we shall explore the definite demand, The secret of the masters who know how to walk into the cosmic kitchen and place an order that cannot be refused. Stay in the flow. The harvest is calling. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a great silent ocean. The water is neither rising nor falling, but suspended in a state of perfect crystalline readiness. This is the realm of the infinite, the unmanifested potential of the universe. In your hands, you hold a single polished stone, a demand. It is your need, your specific requirement for life, your bill, or your dream. You look out over the vast, waiting expanse, and you feel the crushing weight of the question that has haunted every soul who has ever dared to ask for more. How? You see the demand in your hand, but you cannot see the supply. The horizon is empty. The silence of the universe feels like indifference, and the cold air of the shore feels like the reality of your isolation. You have been told to trust, but trust feels like a gamble when the pockets are empty and the deadline is looming. You are caught in a paradox. You have been told that the universe is abundant, yet you stand in a desert of your own making, waiting for a rain that feels impossible. You are like a traveler who stands in the middle of a bustling city, parched with thirst, screaming that there is no water, while standing directly atop an artesian well. The water is there, pressurized and ready, but you have forgotten how to tap into the pipe. The divine right activity is the discovery of that tap. It is the realization that the demand you carry is not a burden you must solve. It is the very key that unlocks the storehouse of the infinite. Why does the human mind struggle so violently with the concept of supply? The root of this psychological trauma is the law of finite perception. We are trained from birth to view the world as a container with limited volume. If there is only one cup of water, and you take it, then I am left with none. This is the logic of the material world, the logic of competition, but the divine right activity operates under the law of infinite expansion. Recursive thinking reveals a profound truth. Why does the demand create the supply? Because the universe is not a collection of separate objects. It is a unified field of consciousness. When a demand arises within your consciousness, it is not an accident. It is a signal. It is the universe itself becoming aware of a missing piece of its own expression. The demand is a vacuum, and the nature of the universe is to rush toward the filling of a vacuum. How then do we bridge the gap between the internal demand and the external supply? We must master the art of acknowledgement. Most people try to find the money or the opportunity. They hunt, they struggle, they scramble. This is an admission that the supply is absent. To move into divine right activity, you must flip the dial of your frequency. You must stop saying, I have to find a way, and start saying, I acknowledge that the supply for this demand is already present in the spiritual realm, waiting for the channel of my receptivity to open. The how of this is the dissolution of the middleman mentality. We believe the boss, the bank, or the client is the source of our supply. We believe we must win their favor to survive. But these are merely channels. The source is the infinite. When you align with the divine right activity, you aren't trying to force a person to give you money. You are calling upon the intelligence that moves through all people to provide the perfect outcome. You are not begging, you are claiming. The demand is the order. The supply is the fulfillment. They are two sides of the same golden coin, and they are already in your hand. You have only to acknowledge their unity. In a mountainous province, there lived an architect who was tasked with building a temple that required materials that simply did not exist in that region. The stone was of a rare, luminous quality. The wood was of a species thought to be extinct. The artisans were masters who had retired decades ago. The king, a man of impatient temperament, gave the architect 30 days to produce the temple or face the consequences. The architect did not panic. He did not run to the markets, nor did he write letters to distant lands. He retreated to a small, empty plot of land, the site of the future temple. He stood in the center of the dust, and he began to map the temple with his mind. He walked through the halls. He felt the coolness of the stone. He heard the echoes of the artisan's tools. He treated the air as if it were already filled with the structures he needed. He practiced the divine right activity. He did not look at the empty lot and see a deficit. He looked at the empty lot and saw a demand. And he knew that because he had the demand, the universe was already conspiring to bring the supply. He walked the perimeter every morning, bowing to the spaces where the pillars would stand. He was creating a vacuum that the universe had to fill. On the 10th day, a caravan of stonemasons, lost in a storm, stumbled into the valley, carrying the exact luminous stone the architect had visualized. On the 20th day, a forest fire in the far north drove a species of rare ancient timber down the river, landing precisely at the foot of the temple site. On the 30th day, a guild of retired master craftsmen, seeking a final legacy, arrived at the gates, hearing a whisper in the wind that told them their work was needed here. The architect had not found these things. He had signaled his demand to the field of consciousness, and the field had responded with terrifying, beautiful accuracy. He had tapped into the artesian well, and the water had risen to meet him. To integrate this truth, you must stop being a hunter and start being a harbor. Today, identify a specific demand in your life, a debt, a need, a goal. Take a card, and on one side, write the demand with absolute clarity. On the other side, write, "I thank the divine that the supply for this demand is already on its way, under grace and in a perfect way." Carry this card. When the feeling of panic arises, touch the card. Do not look for the how. Do not worry if the truck is late. Do not fret about which person will bring the resource. Your job is the what. The how belongs to the infinite. Act as if the package is already on the porch. Walk with the confidence of one who has already placed the order in the cosmic kitchen. You are now aligning yourself with the rhythm of the universe. If you are ready to stop hunting and start attracting, like this video. To signal your trust in the divine right activity, comment the words, "The supply is ready," below to claim your alignment. I am watching these declarations, and I see the supply beginning to shift. You have mastered the art of the demand. You have learned that the universe is not a shop where you must pay, it is a field where you must harvest. But a harvest requires a specific, unwavering focus. You have placed your order, but are you holding the image with enough clarity to pull it into the physical realm? The mind has a faculty that most people use to build dungeons, but it is meant to build cathedrals. In our next chapter, we shall explore the definite demand and the imaging faculty. We are about to look into the mirror of the mind and see not the shadow, but the sovereign. Stay in the light. The order is being filled. Step into the silent, sprawling geometry of the cosmic kitchen, a place of infinite potentiality where the raw materials of existence await the command of the master. Imagine yourself standing at the counter, your hunger a gnawing, visceral reality. You turn to the master chef of the universe and you exhale a vague, desperate breath. "I am hungry. I need food. Help me." The chef looks back at you with a gaze of infinite patience and infinite indifference. Because you have provided no order, the chef brings you nothing, or worse, offers you a chaotic, haphazard plate of leftovers that leaves you emptier than before. This is the great paradox of the unmanifested life. You pray, you wish, you struggle, and you beg the heavens for more. You demand success, you demand wealth, you demand relief. But the universe does not respond to vague, emotional pleas. It responds to the sharp, cold, surgical precision of a command. You are like a man standing before a vast golden gate with a key in your hand, but you refuse to turn it because you are too busy describing the size and the weight of the lock. The hunger is not the problem. The lack of a definite crystalline image of your desire is the tragedy. You are operating as if you are playing a game of chance, hoping that if you yell loud enough, something will fall from the ceiling. But the universe is not a casino. It is an echoing chamber of precision. It delivers exactly what you order, not what you need nor what you deserve. It delivers what you clearly, unwaveringly define. Why does the mind shy away from the definite demand? To answer this, we must deconstruct the psychology of the safety hedge. We are terrified of being specific because if we name our desire and it does not appear, we feel the sting of failure. By keeping our requests vague, I want to be rich, I want to be happy, we protect our ego from the binary reality of success or failure. We live in the gray zone of maybe a psychic purgatory, where we are safe from rejection but doomed to stagnation. Recursive thinking forces us to confront the core of this reluctance. Why do we fear clarity? Because clarity requires commitment, and commitment requires the death of our excuses. If you ask for a precise amount of money to achieve a precise result, you have removed the room for your own self-deception. How does the universe process these demands? The universe operates on the imaging faculty, the mind's ability to hold a picture so clear, so static, and so deeply felt that it forces the ether to solidify around it. Most people use their imaging faculty to visualize their disasters. They spend their hours imaging the breakdown, the eviction, the rejection, and the betrayal. They are actively, diligently crafting the very prisons they complain about. The how of the definite demand is to reclaim this faculty. You must sit in the silence and strip away the noise until you find the exact, non-negotiable requirement for your next step. It is not about greed, it is about architecture. If you were building a bridge, you would not ask the architect for some beams. You would ask for specific lengths, specific alloys, and specific load-bearing capacities. The universe is a master architect, and it is waiting for your blueprints. When you formulate a definite demand, infinite spirit, I make a demand for X, which is mine by divine right. You are not begging. You are issuing a command to the manufacturing department of your own life. You are telling the universe, this is the shape I require. And because the universe is a reflection of your own internal geometry, it has no choice but to provide the exact shape you have ordered. In the high peaks of the northern range, there lived a sculptor named Julian. His village was poor, and the people believed that art was a luxury reserved for kings. Julian, however, was obsessed with a vision. He did not dream of wealth. He did not dream of recognition. He dreamed of a specific statue, a figure of a guardian, carved from a single translucent block of mountain quartz, standing exactly 7 feet tall, holding a lantern that glowed even in the deepest midnight. For years, Julian was ridiculed. He spent his days in the dust, searching for that specific block of quartz. When he couldn't find it, he didn't lower his standard. He didn't settle for marble or granite. He lived in poverty, but in his mind, he walked around that 7-foot guardian every single day. He knew the weight of the chisel in his hand. He knew the exact angle of the lantern's glow. He knew the sound of his mallet striking the stone. He had made a definite demand on the universe, and he held the image with a tenacity that bordered on the divine. Then, on a day of unusual stillness, an earthquake shifted the face of the mountain. It revealed a vein of pure, translucent quartz, a block so vast and so perfect it seemed to have been waiting for him. But the quartz was high on a cliff, impossible to reach. Julian did not cry at the impossibility. He held his demand. His clarity drew to him a band of engineers who were seeking a place to test a new pulley system. They saw the stone. They saw Julian's vision, and they were captivated. They moved the stone for him, simply to see if the vision could be realized. When the statue was finished, it was exactly as he had imagined. It wasn't just a statue, it was a beacon. Kings traveled from across the seas to see it, paying fortunes to stand in its presence. Julian's life changed, not because he chased wealth, but because he was the only one in the kingdom who dared to order the exact shape of his future. He had used the definite demand to command the elements of his reality. Scene 4. The integration and bridge. To integrate this truth, you must leave the world of vague wishes behind. Today, find a quiet place, your own holy of holies. Ask yourself, with brutal honesty, what is the exact requirement of my life right now? Not the $1 million you think you should have, but the specific actionable sum or resource that represents your next leap. Write it down, do not hide it. On a small card, write, Infinite Spirit, I make a demand for specific figure resource which is mine by divine right. This or something better comes to me under grace and in a perfect way. Carry this card in your pocket. Whenever you feel the urge to drift into the gray mist of uncertainty, touch the card. Reassert the command. Do not check your bank account to see if it is true. Check your mind to see if the image is clear. You are placing an order in the cosmic kitchen. Do not walk out of the restaurant before the meal arrives. If you are ready to stop wishing and start commanding, subscribe to commit to this precision. Comment the words, "The order is placed below," to signal your clarity to the universe. I am tracking these orders. The kitchen is already in motion. You have learned to define your reality. You have cleared the fog of maybe and replaced it with the steel of will. But there is a final trap. a subtle golden-colored snare that catches even the most disciplined masters. It is the trap of waiting. Once you place the order, you must learn the physics of expectancy. Most people order, and then they sit by the door, wringing their hands, wondering if the delivery truck actually exists. You must learn to act as if the package is already on your table. How do you maintain the state of expectancy without collapsing into the shadow of doubt? In our next chapter, we shall explore the physics of expectancy. The order is placed. Now, prepare your house for the harvest. Observe the traveler who stands at the bustling train station, a ticket clutched firmly in their palm, eyes scanning the horizon for the metallic glint of the approaching locomotive. They do not pace the platform in a state of weeping hysteria, questioning if the tracks were ever laid. They do not bribe the station master to ensure the train exists. They have purchased the passage, they have confirmed the time, and they have assumed their seat in the waiting room with a calm, unshakable certainty. They are in a state of prepared expectancy. Now contrast this with the soul who claims to seek the riches of the Spirit, who speaks of their desire for a new reality, yet walks through their days with the hunched shoulders of a fugitive. They are like a person who orders a banquet but spends the evening checking the windows for a burglar. They claim to believe in the harvest, yet they carry no basket. They pray for the rain, but they leave their umbrella at home, convinced that the clouds are merely a cruel optical illusion. This is the great irony of the seeker. They place their order with the infinite, and then, with the very next breath, they cancel it with the vibration of their doubt. They live in a state of desperate hoping, a psychological frequency that is antithetical to manifestation. Expectancy is not the passive act of waiting for something to happen. It is the active, internal state of living, as though the event has already concluded. It is the physics of the soul, and without it, even the most precise demand remains a static, lifeless vibration. Why does the human heart find the prepared state so profoundly difficult to maintain? The answer lies in the tyrannical nature of the senses. We are biological creatures designed to react to the present, not to the unseen. Our nervous systems are wired to prioritize the evidence of the eyes over the intuition of the spirit. When we cannot see the delivery truck, when we cannot taste the fruit, our ego interprets the silence of the material world as evidence of failure. Recursive thinking compels us to interrogate the how of this doubt. Why do we interpret the delay as a denial? Because we operate on a linear timeline, viewing time as a distance between our current misery and our future success. But the spiritual realm knows no time, it knows only the now. The how of expectancy, therefore, is the practice of collapsing that timeline. If you truly believe that your demand has been fulfilled in the spiritual realm, you would feel no anxiety. You would feel no frantic need to check the progress of your manifestations. Anxiety is simply the sound of a soul that does not trust its own word. To move into the physics of expectancy, one must understand the package principle. When you order an item from a merchant, you do not sit by the door weeping, wondering if the company is a fraud. You continue your life, you clear the space in your home where the package will live, and you trust the infrastructure of the delivery. The universe is a system of infallible delivery. Your only role is to occupy the space where the delivery can land. How then do we sustain this state amidst the pressure of lack? By treating your daily life as a rehearsals. If you are expecting a massive influx of opportunity, do you act with the chaotic small-mindedness of a victim, or do you move with the quiet, deliberate grace of a steward? You must start acting as if the harvest is already stored in your barns. This is not faking it. This is the act of aligning your frequency with the reality you have already commanded. The physics of expectancy dictates that the environment must eventually conform to the frequency you consistently inhabit. If you stay in the state of knowing, the universe has no other option but to move the mountain to your door. In a region where the sun had scorched the earth for 3 consecutive years, there lived a humble gardener who became the target of the village's mockery. While the other villagers sold their livestock and prepared to flee the arid land, the gardener spent his days digging deep, systematic trenches throughout his barren fields. He spent his meager savings on barrels of fine, nutrient-rich soil, spreading it across the cracked, dusty ground. He spent his nights sharpening his tools and organizing his seed house, ensuring every container was labeled and ready for the planting. A traveler passed by and asked the gardener, Why do you toil in this dust? The earth is dead, and there is no water. You are preparing for a harvest that will never come. The gardener did not pause his digging. He smiled and replied, I am not preparing for a harvest, I am preparing for the rain. The villagers laughed, calling him the fool of the dust. But the gardener did not falter. He lived in the state of absolute expectancy. He didn't just believe the rain would come. He lived his life as if the arrival of the rain was a logistical certainty that required his immediate preparation. He cleaned his storage bins. He reinforced his roof. He made space for the bounty. He was in such a state of readiness that the arrival of the rain would not be a surprise. It would be the inevitable conclusion of his labor. On the final night of the month, the air changed. The clouds, heavy and dark, gathered above the valley. By morning, the rain was pouring down in torrents. While the other villagers were caught in a state of panicked, unprepared chaos, their barns rotting, their seeds misplaced, their tools rusted from neglect, the gardener was ready. He had cleared the channel, and the supply rushed in to fill the space he had prepared. He had mastered the physics of the harvest. He had understood that expectancy is the only key that opens the storehouse of the infinite. To integrate the physics of expectancy, you must cultivate the prepared state. Today, identify one area of your life where you have been praying for a breakthrough but acting as though it will never come. If you are praying for a career shift, are you refreshing your skills and clearing your workspace? If you are praying for financial abundance, are you managing your current affairs with the dignity of a wealthy person? Do this. Today, take one small physical action that signifies you are ready. If you are waiting for a new client, print a document for them. If you are waiting for a new home, buy one single item that will belong in that space. This is not a frivolous expense. It is a sacred signal to the universe that you have created the space for your supply. You are telling the infinite, I am ready. The house is prepared. The guest is expected. Carry yourself with the quiet, unshakable confidence of one who has already signed the contract of their future. You are no longer waiting for the train. You are sitting in your seat, watching the world move toward you. If you are ready to stop waiting and start living in the state of expectancy, subscribe to join the ranks of the prepared. Comment the words, "The space is prepared below," to signal your readiness to the universe. I am witnessing these preparations, and the harvest is already stirring. You have learned to act as a magnet for your own desires. You have moved beyond the shadow of doubt and into the light of absolute knowing. But there is a final, critical barrier to overcome. As the old reality begins to crumble to make way for the new, the mind often recoils. It sees the destruction of the old and calls it loss. It feels the shedding of your former self and calls it death. How do you remain anchored in the light when your world seems to be falling apart in order to be put back together? In our next chapter, we shall explore the cracking of the shell, the biological and spiritual necessity of the breakdown. The seed is not dying, it is becoming an oak. Stay in the light. The cracking is the beginning of the growth. Beneath the frozen crust of the winter earth, a seed lies in the absolute crushing darkness. To the seed, this silence is not a sanctuary, it is an ending. The shell that has protected its fragile identity for seasons begins to feel tight, then claustrophobic, and finally, agonizing. There is a terrifying pressure from within, a biological mandate to expand that pushes against the boundaries of its known existence. To the seed's limited perception, the cracking of its shell is a catastrophe. It feels like dissolution, a traumatic tearing of the only self it has ever known. It is the end of the safety, the end of the shape, the end of the silence. This is the exact visceral experience of the soul undergoing true transformation. You perceive the crumbling of your old structures, the loss of a job, the dissolution of a relationship, the stripping away of your old reputation, and you weep, calling it loss. You feel as though you are being dismantled by a cruel, arbitrary fate. But consider the paradox. If the seed did not crack, the oak could never be born. The discomfort you feel, the frantic, hollow ache of your current instability, is not the result of a collapsing world. It is the friction of your own expansion. You are currently in the gap, that agonizing microsecond between the pulling of the trigger and the ignition of the flame. The bulb is dark, not because the electricity has failed, but because it is currently traveling through the wires, preparing to illuminate. You are not dying, you are being unmade. so that you may be rebuilt in a form that can contain the abundance you have demanded. Why does the psyche interpret liberation as destruction? To answer this, one must understand the ego's obsession with consistency of form. The ego is a master of geometry. It builds boxes, defines edges, and labels realities. It loves the shape of me. When the universe begins to accelerate your growth, it must, by definition, break the vessel that currently holds your limited definition of me. Recursive thinking forces us to ask, why does the shell have to break? Because the current container cannot hold the new capacity. If the oak tree remained inside the shell, it would be a stunted, rotting thing. How does the transformation actually function? It functions through the law of displacement. You cannot be the sovereign of a new reality while you are still tethered to the identity of your old one. The loss you feel is the shedding of skin. The struggle, the panic, and the visceral sense of starting over are the symptoms of your resistance. You are trying to hold the pieces of the broken shell together with your hands, pleading with the universe to keep you safe in your smallness. But the universe has heard your definite demand. It has processed your decree. It is now actively removing the obstacles, the old habits, the toxic dependencies, the limited beliefs that prevent the harvest from manifesting. The how of navigating the cracking phase is the practice of radical surrender. You must stop fighting the dissolution. When the old identity fades, you must lean into the emptiness. You must trust that the darkness of the soil is not a tomb. It is a womb. You are not falling into a hole, you are falling into a foundation. The universe is not taking from you. It is clearing the site for the cathedral you have ordered. To remain in the light while the world seems to be falling apart, you must adopt the stance of the observer. Watch the old self dissolve, with the same calm curiosity with which you would watch a sunset. The sunset is not the end of the world. It is the prerequisite for the sunrise. In the heart of the Renaissance, there was a sculptor tasked with carving a masterpiece for a grand cathedral. He was given a block of marble that had been discarded by others because it was fractured and stained. The master took one look at the stone, saw the hidden figure within, and began to strike with a ferocity that terrified his apprentices. He did not treat the stone with gentleness. He used a heavy mallet and a cold chisel, cutting away massive, jagged chunks of the rock. As the floor of his studio filled with debris, the apprentices cried out, "Master, you are destroying the stone! You are breaking it into pieces." They saw only the ruin of the original block. They saw the loss of the massive, solid form that had stood in the corner for years. The master did not look up. He continued to strike, his movements dictated by the vision he held in his mind. "I am not breaking the stone," he replied, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "I am releasing the guardian that is trapped inside. The stone must be sacrificed so the form can be revealed." Weeks passed. The jagged edges were smoothed, the stains were carved away, the heavy, meaningless rock was gone. In its place stood an angel so beautiful and so graceful that when the villagers entered the studio, they fell to their knees. The master had not ruined the stone. He had liberated it. He understood that the perfection of the form required the brutal sacrifice of the raw material. You are both the master and the marble. The cracking you feel is the master's chisel, and the pieces hitting the floor are the parts of you that were never meant to survive the carving of your own greatness. To integrate this truth, you must consciously shift your perspective from victim of loss to participant in liberation. Today, identify one area of your life where you feel a sense of breaking or ending. Instead of mourning the change, look for the guardian hidden within the change. Ask yourself, what limited aspect of my personality, my status, or my ego is being carved away so that my true self can be revealed? Write down the name of the shell you are shedding. Then, perform a silent internal ceremony of release. Take a deep breath, and as you exhale, physically relax the tension in your shoulders, your jaw, and your chest. You are letting go of the boundary. You are allowing the master to work. You are trusting the soil. You are not starting over. You are expanding. If you are ready to stop fearing the cracking and start celebrating the expansion, like this video to signal your total surrender to your own greatness. Comment the words, "The shell is breaking below," to mark your transition. I am watching these declarations, and I see the oak emerging. You have mastered the most difficult transition of the spiritual life, the surrender of the old self. You are now a blank, open, and powerful conduit, but a conduit is not the destination. The final movement of our journey is the reclamation of your power. You have cleaned the slate, you have placed the order, and you have survived the cracking. Now, you must learn to command the wand. In our final chapter, we shall explore the reclamation of the wand, the integration of all you have learned into a permanent sovereign way of life. The harvest is white. The sickle is in your hand. Stay in the light. You are ready. Imagine a king who has spent a lifetime in exile, wandering the barren outskirts of his own territory, dressed in the tatters of a commoner, his brow furrowed with the dust of the road. He has lived as a subject to the elements, bowing to the whims of the weather, the economy, and the opinions of those he encountered. He possesses a scepter, an ancient gold-wrought wand, but he has buried it deep within his pack, believing it to be a mere trinket, a relic of a myth he no longer dares to believe. He stands now before the gates of his own capital, shivering in the cold, convinced that he has no right to enter. He looks at the ironclad gates and sees an impenetrable wall. But observe the moment of the great remembering. He reaches into his pack, his fingers brushing against the cool, familiar weight of the wand. He pulls it forth. As the golden light of the scepter catches the morning sun, the air around him begins to hum with the resonance of lost authority. He does not knock on the gate. He does not plead with the guards. He simply lifts the wand, and the very air bows to his presence. The gate does not open by force. It opens because the environment must eventually yield to the sovereign who has finally reclaimed his title. You are that king, and your word, your conviction, your decree is that wand. You have wandered the desert of lack long enough, acting as a servant to the shadows. Today, the exile ends. You are not a guest in this universe. You are the architect. The wand is not a tool you find. It is a power you authorize. The moment you decide to use it is the moment the gates of your own kingdom swing wide. Why has the wand been hidden for so long? The psychological answer is found in the fear of sovereignty. To wield the wand is to accept total responsibility for your reality. If you are a victim, you can blame the circumstances. If you are a king, you must own the results. Most souls shy away from the wand because they prefer the safety of the prison to the exposure of the throne. Recursive thinking compels us to interrogate the how of this power. Why does the word act as a wand? Because the universe is constructed of vibration. Words are not just sounds. They are standing waves of intent that organize the subatomic fabric of reality. When you speak a word with the conviction of the heart, you are literally rearranging the stars. How do you keep the wand sharp? You keep it sharp through the practice of integrated alignment. Most people use the wand sporadically, waving it when they are happy and dropping it when they are terrified. This creates a fractured reality, a stuttering of the manifestations. To be a sovereign, your wand must be an extension of your being. You do not use the wand. You are the wand. Every thought, every breath, every silent expectation must align with your decree. If you claim to be the sovereign of abundance, you cannot vibrate at the frequency of the beggar. The why of our manifestation failures is always a split loyalty. We want the throne, but we are still in love with our misery. The how of reclamation is the synthesis of the three pillars: the word, the blessing, and the demand. You have learned to silence the discordant record of the past, you have learned to bless the friction of the present, and you have learned to order the shape of the future. Now, you must integrate these into a single, cohesive way of living. You must walk the earth with the quiet confidence of one who knows that their reality is not something that happens to them, but something that emerges from them. The universe is a mirror that reflects the state of the observer. When you stand as the sovereign, the mirror has no choice but to show you a king. In an age of legend, there was a sovereign named Ethelred who ruled a land known as the Ever-Shifting Isles. The islands were plagued by tempests, floods, and sudden, violent shifts in the tide. The people lived in a constant state of flux, their homes destroyed, their crops washed away. Ethelred was born into this chaos, and for years he labored to build walls, to dig moats, and to flee the rising waters. He was a master of evasion, but he was a slave to the storm. One night, as a hurricane threatened to wipe his final stronghold from the map, Ethelred reached his limit. He walked out of his palace, stood upon the highest cliff, and faced the roaring dark. He did not build a wall. He did not scream at the wind. He took out his scepter, held it high, and entered into the silence. He recalled his lineage, the memory of a time when the tides obeyed the rhythm of the sovereign's heart. He didn't speak to the wind, he spoke to the source of the wind. By the authority of the throne I inhabit, he whispered, I command the elements to align with the design of peace. The storm is not my master, it is the servant of the order I now establish. The storm didn't stop immediately. It raged with a final, desperate fury, as if testing the weight of his command. But Aethelred did not move. He stood, his wand raised, his heart anchored in the quiet frequency of the kingdom he desired. Slowly, the turbulence began to subside. The clouds parted not by force, but by invitation. The tides retreated, the winds softened to a breeze, and a radiant, steady light bathed the isles. Aethelred had realized that the storm was not a physical entity to be fought. It was a manifestation of the collective anxiety of his people, which he had finally ceased to mirror. He had reclaimed his wand, and in doing so, he had transformed the entire geography of his reality. To integrate the reclamation of the wand, you must finalize your covenant with yourself. You are no longer permitted to speak as a subject. You are no longer allowed to act as a refugee from your own life. Today, finalize your sovereign charter. Write down your mission, your standards, and your absolute, non-negotiable commitment to the frequency of your desire. Carry this charter with you. When you feel the old shadows of lack creeping back in, read it. Remember who you are. Remember that your word is the wand. Practice the daily decree. Each morning, before you face the world, stand in your holy of holies and speak your command for the day. Do not ask, do not hope. Declare, this day is mine. I command the elements of my experience to align with my divine design. And then walk through your day as if you have already seen the outcome. You are the king. You are the wand. You are the reclamation. If you are ready to walk this earth as a sovereign, like this final lesson to seal your commitment. Comment the words, "The wand is mine," below to finalize your oath of sovereignty. I am witnessing this, and the world is already beginning to change for you. You have completed the journey. You have moved from the zero of your bank account to the infinite of your spirit. You have learned that the world you see is a shadow, and the power you hold is the light. You are not starting over. You are finally beginning. But as you walk out of this story and into your new life, remember that the wand is only as powerful as your consistency. The world will test you. The shadows will flicker. But you, standing in the center of your projector, will know the truth. You are the source. Go forth, command your reality, and create the kingdom you were born to rule. The harvest is yours. Walk in power. The journey ends here, but the rain is just beginning.